A green anaconda can crush a human in seconds, but it's a graveyard toy compared to the monster waiting at the end of this list. We're scaling up until we reach a 15-meter nightmare that treats crocodiles like snacks. Green anaconda. Mass is a weapon of absolute denial in the stagnant basins of the Amazon. While common intuition suggests that a hunter must be light and agile, the green anaconda operates on the principle of biological inertia. It is a 400-pound anchor of pure muscle that treats the water as a zero-gravity combat zone. This is not a creature that pursues, it occupies. The constriction process isn't a crude attempt to break bones, but a surgical strike against the circulatory system. Each time the prey exhales, the anaconda tightens the coil, occupying the space where the lungs should expand. This pressure forces a spike in internal blood pressure that the heart cannot overcome, leading to a localized systemic collapse in under 60 seconds. The anaconda is an endurance build that relies on the sheer physics of being too heavy to escape. It is a wall of flesh that refuses to move until the heartbeat inside it stops. But while this beast relies on the stubborn gravity of its own weight, the next predator has optimized for reach, turning its entire body into a high-tension cable that deletes the distance between life and death. Reticulated Python. Length is a tactical exploit that allows the reticulated python to exist in multiple zip codes simultaneously. If the anaconda is a tank, this is a high-damage striker that uses 10 meters of reach to turn the jungle floor into a minefield. It has successfully integrated itself into the margins of human civilization, utilizing urban drainage systems and rafters as launch platforms for its strikes. The vertebrae of this serpent are a marvel of repetitive engineering, allowing it to coil with a speed that the human eye struggled to resolve into a single motion. It possesses a jaw architecture that allows for the total unhinging of the mandibles, facilitating the consumption of prey that exceeds its own body width by 300%. This is a biological stretch goal that functions in reality. It anchors its recurved teeth into the flesh and uses the momentum of its strike to whip its body into a lethal spiral. But these modern giants are small compared to the monsters that once thrived when the Earth turned into a literal biological greenhouse. To find the true kings, we have to dig into a timeline where a single snake vertebra is the size of a human head, and the hunt was measured in tons, not kilograms. Gigantophis. The Sahara Desert hides the skeletal remains of a time when the world was a high-temperature growth hack. Gigantophis was a 10-meter behemoth that patrolled the African marshes during the Eocene, an era when the planet's thermostat was set to a permanent redline. Cold-blooded biology is a slave to ambient heat, and in this greenhouse environment, the metabolic engine of the snake was allowed to expand to impossible proportions. This was not a snake that hunted rodents. It was a specialist in the liquidation of primitive elephants. The heat provided the external energy required to move a body of this scale, allowing Gigantophis to maintain a level of aggression that modern reptiles can only achieve in short bursts. It was a freight train of muscle that moved with the silence of a shadow. It represents the upper limit of what a serpent can achieve when the environment removes the metabolic brakes. But while this was a singular giant, it belonged to a global dynasty of constrictors that refused to die out even when the world began to change. Madtsoia. Evolution rarely abandons a successful design for a mass murderer. Madtsoia represents a lineage of giant constrictors that dominated the planet for nearly 40 million years, existing as a global franchise of terror from South America to the Australian outback. While other species experimented with venom or speed, this family stuck to the primary logic of crushing force. The vertebrae found in the fossil record are the size of dinner plates, designed to withstand the extreme torque generated during a high-pressure kill. This was a biological insurance policy that survived multiple extinction events by being the most efficient predator in any given ecosystem. It watched the rise and fall of countless mammalian empires, remaining a static crushing constant in the undergrowth. A master of the land, a predator so successful that it saw no need to change its basic blueprint for eons. But as the land became crowded, the nightmare eventually sought a new frontier where the weight of a giant could be hidden beneath the waves. Palaeophis. The ocean is not a sanctuary from the serpent. It is simply a medium that hides the scale of the threat. Paleophis was a semi-aquatic giant that patrolled ancient coastlines, turning the shallow seas into a suffocating trap. Most modern sea snakes are specialized, small-scale hunters, but this was a heavyweight contender that reached lengths of nearly 10 meters. Its bone structure suggests a high metabolic rate, indicating it was an active, high-velocity hunter that could pursue prey through the surf with the agility of a shark. It occupied the coastal margins, utilizing the buoyancy of the water to support a body mass that would be cumbersome on land. But while the sea snake owned the global coasts, a different kind of ancient terror was weaving itself into the early history of the human species in the isolation of the southern hemisphere. Wonambi. Deep in the Australian outback, the first human settlers encountered a reality that would later become the foundation of their mythology. Wonambi was a 6-meter constrictor that survived long enough to watch the arrival of the first people on the continent. It was a thick-bodied ambush specialist that haunted the waterholes, effectively turning the most vital resource in a desert landscape into a site of guaranteed violence. It did not possess the advanced, flexible jaw hardware of modern pythons, which meant it had to rely on even greater constriction force to process its meals. This resulted in a slower, more mechanical death for any creature caught in its coils. It was a geological feature that could move, a relic of a giant age that refused to vanish until the climate finally forced its extinction. But even Wonambi's legend is a footnote compared to the moment the Earth's temperature peaked, creating a predator so massive it could only exist in a world that was literally on fire. Titanoboa. Titanoboa is the terminal point of serpentine evolution, a ton of mobile muscle that processed the environment like an industrial furnace. At 15 meters long, it did not inhabit the ecosystem. It dictated the terms of its existence. Titanoboa lived in the Cerrejón rainforest of Colombia during a period when the world was a literal steam room, providing the thermal energy required to fuel a cold-blooded engine of this magnitude. This was not a hunter that relied on camouflage. It was a predator that relied on a total system shutdown of its prey. It exerted a pressure of 400 pounds per square inch, which is the physical equivalent of having the weight of 3 Eiffel Towers crushing your ribcage simultaneously. It could swallow a full-grown crocodile as if it were a minor caloric snack, its throat expanding to accommodate a biological payload that seems impossible by modern standards. It was the final boss of the Paleocene, a creature that converted heat and meat into a terrifying, singular dominance. The most disturbing reality of Titanoboa is that as the global temperature continues to rise, the thermal window required to reboot this nightmare is slowly beginning to open once again.